Logos. They're usually what we think of when referring to one particular team as an entity. Some are basic, while others have more of a story to tell. An evolution per se, and various factors have caused each and every logo to appear a certain way at the inception of each franchise to the present day. In this video, we're going to go over each NHL team's logo and how and why they've changed into what we see represented on jerseys throughout the league. We're going to be rather brief here on how each team got its start due to the fact that I did a rather extensive two-part series on how each team got its identity minus, Seattle, because at that time it wasn't yet a concept. And with that, here is the history of each NHL logo explained. Well, it doesn't exactly happen every day that an NHL franchise comes into existence bearing the logo from a Disney movie. Therefore, for the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, you could say that the history behind the team's inception is one of the most unique. Since the first film released in 1992 of the Mighty Ducks trilogy, the team already had its first logo drawn out for them, literally, as the logo itself, which featured a cartoon-like goalie mask in the shape of a duck at the time, seemed ambitious, but it has become one of the most endeared in the NHL today. Aside from various secondary logos and uniforms worn by the team over the next decade or so, there weren't any changes to the main logo itself until 2006. As I mentioned before, there were some pretty unique circumstances surrounding the team and its history, as due to Disney deciding to sell the franchise in 2005, it wasn't long after, due to the whole, trademark thing, that the team changed its brand and identity entirely, and also its name, to the Anaheim Ducks. The color scheme, a completely different logo, along with the name, represented a new era, as the first logo sporting the team's new name featured another part of a duck's body on it instead of the head as before, now was a webbed duck's foot, and simultaneously, a duck in flight was clearly visible in the shape of a D. The logo itself paired along nicely with the tougher, brasher demeanor that the Ducks became known for under the leadership of Brian Burke. Ever since the iconic D has remained, the current Ducks logo is simply the isolated letter with multiple images inside of it. Regardless, though, the team hasn't forgotten its roots, as the first logo, with so much history behind it, is visible on the current jersey's shoulder patch, and is also the focal point of the team's secondary jersey as well. So to avoid confusion here, what we'll do, since obviously the franchise didn't always have Coyote connections, instead more northern ones in Winnipeg. Since they're both current franchises, we'll just start with the also iconic Kachina logo. Similarly to Anaheim, the team's first logo was drawn up in the 90s, which seemed to be a time where teams were willing to break away from the norm, or more simplistic looking representations, and dabble a little more creatively. And you can definitely say that the then Phoenix Coyotes did just that for their debut season of '96, as the logo is still seen as one of, if not the most unique. Featured on the team's sweaters was a cartoon-like coyote with a hockey stick and a very southwestern theme, as in the main influence was derived from the rich Native American culture that dwells in Arizona. Not only was the logo one of a kind as far as the image was concerned, but also the colors as well, of green, purple, beige, and burgundy that were displayed all under the team's name, Phoenix Coyotes. Also, like Anaheim, the first logo change seen was the simple dropping of the wording with the main logo still evident. This happened in 1999 and continued on until 2003, when the franchise was uprooted from Phoenix to the suburbs of Glendale. Along with the name change from the Phoenix Coyotes to the Arizona Coyotes, the jerseys, and more importantly the logo itself, underwent a massive rebranding. No longer were the Native American roots displayed front and center, instead a more basic approach was taken, as the Kachina theme was replaced with the Howling Coyote that we're familiar with today. Outside of various secondary logos and themes, not much has changed today, aside from the fact that the Kachina jersey has been brought back along with the crescent moon image at center ice, which is my personal favorite that the NHL has to offer. Well, long gone are the 90s themes here, because the Bruins got their start long before hockey was even a thing in the western part of America, in 1924. And like most original six teams, Boston's first inaugural logo wasn't the iconic one that we see today. The Bruin, which is an English folk name for brown bear, was featured in the center of the logo in between the team's name. Rather than the traditional black and yellow that we know of today, the crest was in gold and brown. Conveniently, the team's first owner owner Charles Adams, who only paid a fee of $15, mind you, for the team's inception, was a chain owner of grocery stores which bore the same color scheme. For quite some time, for around the first 20 years of Boston's existence, each new logo seemed to follow up with a variation of the same one, as in the first logo was slightly changed after the team's debut season, which no longer featured the brown backdrop around the top letters, which also displayed a different font. Then, the college phase hit, as it's referred to humorously, in the 1930s, in which a very simplistic B was stitched on the jerseys in the same brown and gold. After a trial season, just as the last logo, another similar one came about, but this time it featured the current color scheme of black and yellow. As the Golden 50s approached and the franchise's 25th anniversary was on the horizon, the Bruins released the first rendition of many logos to come, which featured the previous logo simply overlaid on another image, which formed the spoke-to-be concept that we know of today. Contrary to popular belief, however, unlike Detroit's longtime logo, which features a wheel, this wasn't the intention here. Interestingly, the reasoning behind it derived from Harvard-educated writer Oliver Wendell Holmes, who referred to Boston as the hub of the solar system, in which, more specifically, he was referring to the Massachusetts State House. Therefore, in more simplistic terms, the logo represents the hub of America, or rather Boston itself. Really though, this only fits the highly educated New England region to a T, does it not? Despite a few minor changes along the way, including some outlining and slight color shifts, the initial concepts are still very visible today in the modern age. Unlike some more original sports cities, Buffalo has seemingly followed the trend of, well, essentially being the Buffalo Buffaloes, if you think about it logo-wise. And when it came time for the Knox brothers to name their franchise, the name Buffalo Sabres seemed to stick. Similarly to the Buffalo Bills today, the logo that the team began with featured a buffalo and two sabres, which according to sportslogos.net, were integrated into the logo and name due to the fan of the name contest winner who related skate blades being sharp to sabres. The look logo-wise remained the same throughout the French Connection era and into the mid-90s. But, as we saw with Arizona, with a new arena comes a whole new look. Upon the 1996-97 season commencing, Buffalo had dropped the royal blue and yellow scheme and adopted a scheme that resembles the Senators' current one, as the main three colors became red, white, and black. The logo, although still containing a buffalo, appeared more aggressive and contained more detail to the face. Aside from minor tweaks to its color, the logo remained as a primary one for nearly a decade. And then, similarly to the controversial motorist from Dallas that we'll talk about later, a logo was born that came to infuriate a large margin of Sabres fans. The man behind the unfortunate monstrosity was a graphic designer for Reebok, Christopher Bazin. After being asked to invent a new logo for Buffalo, Bazin went to work with the intent of pushing conventional boundaries with the intention of creating a design that symbolized speed and power. We wanted to create something that would be iconic and a little more forward-thinking. Reebok wanted to push the envelope somehow. I give them credit because they tried to be innovative. The Sabres also wanted to go in a new direction based on what they decided on. Bazin says, well, the end result was definitely unique and original, but unfortunately wasn't received well by fans.
Not like the slug logo. I hated it when it came out.
I've never cared for it. I just don't think it's not good for Buffalo.
The logo itself is referred to as things like furry horned cashew, horned guinea pig, and the most famous, the Buffa slug. Therefore, after 4 or so seasons, the club eventually went back to its roots, while once again adopting a similar logo for around a decade to its first, only going with navy blue and gold instead of royal blue and yellow. After the Buffa slug, however, the team hasn't strayed far and has only made slight adjustments, including going back to the royal blue and removing the previous outline, giving it a more sharper, modern look than before. Another interesting scenario here, because the Flames logo that represents the franchise today had nothing to do with Calgary at all during its inception. Similarly to the Columbus Blue Jackets, the logo is derived from events that took place during the Civil War and is referenced to the city of Atlanta being burnt to the ground by Union troops in 1864. But upon the team's uprooting in the 1980s to Calgary, owner at the time decided that the second part of the team name would remain, as the oil-rich province of Alberta would seemingly still be fitting. Therefore, the previous flaming A would then be changed to a C initially. for their inaugural season in Calgary. The team kept its same colors on its crest, only to change them slightly in the mid-90s by adding an outline to it. Besides this, the only thing that's changed when it comes to the C is the colors, as the Flames adopted a new look in the mid-2000s with a darker shade of red jersey-wise paired with a black logo. Outside of the famous Blasty third jersey that first appeared in the late 90s, the Flames have been rather conservative with logo design. They've dabbled a bit with coloring the logo differently, making it black, red, white, yellow, but outside of that, they've stuck to their guns per se, and haven't strayed from the initial concept. As the Flames today sport strikingly similar threads with the same colored crest in home and away as the team did when they first arrived in Alberta. Prior to moving from Hartford, Connecticut, the Hurricanes were originally known as the Hartford Whalers, but since the team remained on the East Coast and didn't move far, it still carried on an aquatic name due to the fact that North Carolina seems to be a hotbed for hurricanes. Therefore, a logo was adopted depicting a digital glimpse into the eye of a hurricane. The colors of black and red were derived from the US flag flown for storm warning, hence the take warning theme that the team has going on in Raleigh today. Aside from just the flag colors for secondary jerseys and for jersey patches alike, the twin representation of storm flags blowing in the wind has been part of Carolina's logo scheme for quite some time. The team did also sport a singular representation of this, with one flag in front of a triangle representing North Carolina's Tri-Cities on a third jersey, but this logo wasn't as well received. Except for minute color changes throughout, the primary logo has remained the same since the team moved down south in the mid-90s. One of the most well-known and iconic logos in all of sports today, the Blackhawks inherited their name due to their owner's deep military roots. Thus, the first logo is what we call a roundel, which contained the wording on the outside and on the inside the face of an Indian chief. This inaugural logo was in effect for close to a decade, and was the one that Chicago chose to sport in their most recent Winter Classic. The same roundel look went on well into the late 50s, in different variations. The last roundel, however, displayed 4 feathers in the figure's hair. This small change would remain as a staple in the logo itself, and in 1957, Chicago decided to simplify the logo by just stitching the Blackhawks face onto jerseys for the new team crest. The first rendition of many featured a figure that almost resembled a hieroglyphic from Egyptian culture, as in there was no white featured in the eyes. But this experiment soon came to a close after 2 seasons, and suddenly the logo had more life to it. The face was also taking on a more symmetrical shape, with a more simple yet bold sort of look. This time around, the Blackhawks were satisfied with their latest creation, as it remained in effect for nearly 3 decades. After a few takes of dabbling with various colors and shading, Chicago has seemingly settled on the logo that we see today, as the current crest has been around now for over 20 years. In case you're completely new to hockey and you found yourself rather puzzled while spotting a fleur-de-lis on Avalanche jerseys, well, this wasn't just random, as in there's a logical explanation for it. Well, back in the disco days of the 70s, it just so happens that there was a team awarded to Quebec City. As the WHA dissolved and the NHL absorbed some of the teams, the Nordiques happened to be one of them. Therefore, for around 15 years, the Quebec Nordiques had their classic red and blue logo with just one variation. From there, as the team moved to a radically different cultural setting, the Quebec Nordiques became the Colorado Avalanche. But despite adopting a new team name and logo, the Avs still hold on to their roots. The logo in which Colorado debuted with is largely the one it reps today, with only a few minute changes taking place. It depicts an avalanche surrounding an A with a puck at the end. Aside from a little change in shade, this simplistic yet satisfying logo has represented Colorado for over 20 years. As previously mentioned, the remembrance of the Civil War is what the Jackets' intent was when branding their team, as the state of Ohio contributed more leaders of the Union side of it than any other state. Their first logo was very original and unique. While many saw it as cartoonish and tacky, it's still an image that many Jackets fans still cherish today. with a combination of the team's initials with 13 stars within. In the middle was a hockey stick with its own star on top, similarly to a Christmas tree. And below, in case spectators weren't able to put two and two together, the long script was displayed directly beneath. After the lockout, however, beginning in the 2006-2007 season, a new logo came into fruition, as it was introduced first as an alternate for the club. Since it was so well received, the team decided to make it the primary crest for the next campaign. Similarly to the last, this design featured 13 smaller stars. This time, they were displayed on the state flag of Ohio, with another larger star appearing this time in the center. The flag, wrapped around the star, is in the shape of a C, standing for Ohio's capital city. Although their jerseys have evolved over the years, the logo in the middle hasn't at all. And besides developing a new third jersey, and the reverse retro of course, CBJ has largely played it safe ever since. Similarly to the Calgary Flames, the new location for the Minnesota North Stars was convenient, as it was a Lone Star state in Texas, deriving its name originally from the Minnesota state motto, which is in French traditionally, but translates to the Star of the North. The North Stars, similarly to Dallas, had one single star on their logo that bore the colors of green and yellow. Almost like clockwork, however, prior to the team's relocation for their last 2 seasons in Minnesota, the north part of the name was dropped. In relation to the logo itself, it allowed for a more seamless transition, at least as far as the branding was concerned, as upon the 1993-94 season commencing, the same logo adorned the team's sweaters with a striking resemblance. Of course, that hasn't always been the case, as the word Dallas has been added into the mix in the past as well. But a few years after the new millennium, the team, after having a stab or two at an alternate jersey, put together one logo that NHL fans know very well for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, we're going there. From 2003 to 2006, the Dallas Stars decided that it was a good idea to, for the players to get in touch with their feminine side, and thus the Mooterus was born. But don't take it from me that this wasn't well received, take it from the players that actually had to wear it.
Those things were hideous.
I can't believe I had to wear that thing on the ice. Whose kid designed that anyway?
So, after turning to a rather simplistic logo in 2013 that they still rep today, Dallas, aside from the Mooterus of course, hasn't really gone outside of the realm of basic. If there was an original 6 team that was awarded for making the least amount of logo and branding changes, it would have to be the Detroit Red Wings. I don't know, maybe since the team took on 3 different name changes before its first decade of existence, just seemed like enough. Anyways, for their inaugural season, the team played it safe and decided to just stitch a single D onto jerseys to start. As the 1930s replaced the Roaring Twenties with financial difficulty, that was felt throughout the country, while this also translated to the team as well. But in 1932, upon fresh ownership, came a fresh logo, this time standing for the Detroit Falcons. James Norris Sr., however, after purchasing the team, decided to take a new approach to the branding. This time, however, the idea came from a more personal standpoint, as Norris had previously played for the Winged Wheelers of the Montreal Amateur Athletic Association. Therefore, despite many later on coming to believe that the auto industry was completely to thank for such an iconic logo that stood the test of time, well, Ford and Chrysler aren't exactly to thank here. And ever since the switch in 1934, the logo, despite going through a few adjustments, has remained as the simplistic crest that the team is known for. Well, there's another team that doesn't give us a lot to talk about logo-wise, because their primary one hasn't really changed at all. But I suppose once Wayne Gretzky wears it and wins 4 Stanley Cups with it on, well, maybe there's no real reason to adjust. Anyways, similarly to Calgary, Edmonton is known as a city within oil country, an area rich in oil and gas. Logo itself, it fittingly features a single oil drop at the top and an appearance of an oil drip from the lower word within. The first inaugural crest displayed a royal blue and orange surrounded by white. Although the shade of blue itself has changed, the most notable adjustment came in the mid-90s, when a red outline surrounded the logo, but after close to 15 seasons, the outline was dropped and has mostly remained the same since throughout. And finally, we're back to the 90s, where originality seemed to prevail during this design era. The second team, to come out of the Sunshine State, decided to get more creative than its interstate rival and debuted with a ferocious depiction of the Florida state animal, the panther, as the logo featured a jumping cat with its claws and teeth envisioned. Aside from color changes, the design seemed to stick, as it remained on home and away jerseys for the team's first 2 decades of existence. However, the first major rebranding that the team underwent was a more conservative design for the start of the 2016 campaign. The clean, military type of look was largely inspired by U.S. Army vet and Panthers' current owner, Vincent Viola, who gave his reasoning behind the sleek design. I think the logo harkens to the vanguard of courage, the idea that you put a shield on the hockey uniform. It's something to protect, but you also want to protect it. We wanted something that began a new tradition of winning and demonstrated courage and selfless dedication to a team pursuit of victory, Viola says. And aside from the sun and palm tree logo, there hasn't been any other secondary logos in the mix. There have been, however, some brief alternate jerseys that have come and went. However, the Panthers have kept things rather simple, while bringing the flying cat back with a beautiful reverse retro last year. Burger King, gang activity, Wayne Gretzky are all a few things that come to mind when it comes to the LA Kings' interesting logo history. Joining the league in the mid-60s as part of the biggest expansion in NHL history of '67, the Kings, similarly to the Lakers, adopted the same color scheme of yellow and purple. Conveniently, as most of us know, purple has long been associated with royalty. Therefore, the first official logo featured a shape that has been associated with medieval times and resembled a coat of arms. The shape itself only changed slightly, and the colors remained the same up until the season of 1987. The Kings' colors were changed to black and gray just in time for the arrival of the Great One. After experimenting with the new colors for a season, the club then switched to a logo that encompassed the wording fully, and this change seemed to stick. During this stint, the notorious Burger King jersey made its debut, and was very short-lived as a third jersey, as after only 8 games in '96, the design was scrapped and never to be seen again. It wasn't until the late '90s that the Kings made the decision to bring the purple back and to drop the gray and black, which had become associated with gang activity in the area. The new primary color scheme wasn't similar to the Lakers this time, but instead to another interstate NBA team in the Sacramento Kings. The logo contained a shield and hockey sticks in front, and within, a star, crown, and a lion with sunglasses. And after switching to a more simplistic design soon after the millennium, the logo that we're familiar with today came about in 2011, which contained a smaller version of the crown inside, matching the new color scheme. Even though LA's designs have changed quite a bit throughout franchise history, the same coat of arms shape that it entered the league with is still the one that they wear today, at the present moment. When you have something that works, you stick with it. At least, that seems to be the philosophy that Minnesota has demonstrated over the years. After an NHL team finally returned to the Twin Cities, this time, a more different, intricate approach was taken as far as branding was concerned, as the Wild debuted with one of the most exquisite logos to come about in league history. The symbol itself featured the head of what resembles a bear with a silhouette of trees inside, along with a stream for the animal's mouth, a star, presumably the North Star, for its eye, and the moon in the center. The logo was first introduced with the team's name above it in 2000 and didn't change until 2013. But even then, the change was slight as the wording was simply dropped and has remained the same ever since. Aside from a few alternate logos over the years that have been largely simplistic, the Wild's crest has stood the test of time here over 2 decades later.